What if Meghan Markle knew she'd never be able to carry children and hid that secret from the royal family? What if one of the most debated figures in modern royalty had been keeping a medical secret so private, so personal, that even those closest to her, perhaps even her royal husband, never knew the full truth? What if that secret had the power to unravel the very foundation of a family story built on tradition, bloodline, and public trust? And what if the person breaking that silence wasn't a tabloid editor or an anonymous insider, but the man who once wore a wedding band engraved with her name? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The headlines broke like thunder across digital platforms. Trevor Engelson, Meghan Markle's ex-husband, wasn't just revisiting the past. He was allegedly pulling the curtain back on a part of her life that had remained sealed off from both the public and royal narrative. According to Trevor, Meghan had undergone a private uterine surgery in her late 20s, a procedure so significant, so life-altering, that it made natural pregnancy medically impossible. And the most staggering part of all, he claimed she told him herself. In his words, "She told me she'd never be able to carry a child, and begged me to keep it secret." This wasn't just a revelation. This was a bombshell timed with eerie precision. In a world where Meghan's pregnancies had already been steeped in suspicion, with conspiracy theories surrounding surrogacy and public appearances that sparked more questions than answers, Trevor's claims sent shockwaves. It wasn't just a story about medical history. It was about honesty, about image, about a secret buried beneath layers of ambition, royal expectations, and public storytelling. But to understand the weight of this revelation, we need to rewind. Strip away the tiaras, the red carpets, the global foundations, and look back at a time when Meghan Markle was not a duchess, not a tabloid fixture, not a global lightning rod, but simply Meghan, an actress with big dreams, a rising star on the brink of Hollywood success, and a wife to a man who believed they would take on the world together. Their story began with laughter, with champagne glasses clinking at LA industry events, with hopeful glances exchanged between a film producer and a struggling actress. Trevor and Meghan were, by most accounts, a picture of Hollywood normalcy, ambitious, attractive, driven. They married in 2011, long before royal titles or international controversies. But the dream, it seems, unraveled faster than expected. Just 2 years into their marriage, Meghan reportedly mailed her wedding ring back to Trevor in an envelope. No note, no closure. That act alone would mark the beginning of a lifelong fracture. And now, years later, it may be the reason Trevor has chosen to speak. In the midst of that failed marriage, Trevor claims, came a moment of unimaginable vulnerability. A private conversation in which Meghan confided in him about her medical procedure. According to sources close to Trevor, it wasn't framed as a sad confession. It was matter-of-fact, clinical, perhaps even rehearsed. She had undergone uterine surgery to address complications she allegedly described as persistent and painful. The prognosis: she would never be able to carry a pregnancy to term naturally. This wasn't something casually dropped during dinner. It was a moment sealed by an explicit plea: don't ever tell anyone. Trevor says he honored that promise. For years, through their split, through her ascent to royalty, through Oprah specials, Netflix deals, and royal births announced with choreographed flair, he kept quiet until now. Why now? That question is at the heart of this unfolding drama. Some suggest Trevor has finally had enough of watching his past be rewritten. Others believe the breaking point came when he was approached for comment by a media outlet working on a documentary that touched on Meghan's past relationships. One source claims he agreed to cooperate only after being shown an excerpt of Meghan allegedly describing their marriage as a starter home for her ambition. Others say Trevor's silence was bought for years, not with money, but with a fear of what crossing paths with the royal media machine could cost him professionally. Now, with the story exploding across platforms, it forces a reconsideration of Meghan's entire maternal narrative. Did Prince Harry know about this alleged surgery? Was the palace informed before royal birth announcements were made? And if the story is true, what does that mean for Archie and Lilibet, 2 children already caught in a storm of royal succession debates and tabloid speculation? What makes this revelation so seismic is not the medical procedure itself. Plenty of women undergo reproductive surgeries and live healthy, full lives. It's the context, the secrecy, the fact that Meghan went on to become part of an institution obsessed with lineage and legacy. In the House of Windsor, who you are is deeply tied to where you come from and who you give birth to. This also isn't the first time questions have been raised about Meghan's pregnancies. Photos from her public appearances while pregnant sparked an endless sea of social media debates. The infamous collapsing belly clip, the unusually small hospital team present at the birth, and the unusual lack of photo documentation for both children's early days only added fuel to the fire. Royal insiders have long whispered that things didn't add up, but until now, no one from her inner circle had stepped forward to validate those doubts. Trevor's words, if true, are the missing puzzle piece. And if they are false or exaggerated, they represent something equally dangerous. A personal vendetta masquerading as truth in a media ecosystem that thrives on spectacle. But either way, the story cannot be ignored. It's important to note that Meghan has not commented on the claim as of the time of this reporting. Her legal team has remained silent, which for some observers is strategic, and for others, deeply suspicious. Public figures often choose silence in the face of lies. But silence can also deepen doubt, especially when a narrative has already taken hold. As this story gains traction, it poses larger questions not just about Meghan Markle, but about the ecosystem we've created around celebrity, royalty, and motherhood. Why do we feel entitled to a woman's medical history? When does privacy become secrecy? And when does secrecy become deception? The stakes are enormous, not just for Meghan, or Trevor, or even Harry, but for the institution they challenged. The monarchy they exited, and the truth they claimed to stand for. Was their departure really about racism and bullying? Or was there a deeper fear, one tied to the exposure of something Meghan could never fully control, her biology? The truth is not yet fully known. But as we dig deeper in the coming sections, we will examine the timelines, the motives, the medical details, and the social implications of Trevor Engelson's claim. We'll follow the breadcrumbs from Hollywood to Buckingham Palace, from red carpets to royal nurseries. And by the end of this video, we'll explore not just what may have happened, but what it means for all of us who watch this story unfold in real time. Because when a royal fairy tale begins to fracture, it's not just the characters who change. It's the audience, too. Before Meghan Markle became the Duchess of Sussex, before the wedding watched by millions, before the Oprah interview that shook the monarchy, there was Trevor Engelson. To understand the gravity of Trevor's recent claims, one must begin by understanding who he is, not as a footnote in Meghan's story, but as a fully formed individual whose life once intertwined with hers in ways that the world chose to forget. Trevor Engelson was born on October 23, 1976, in Great Neck, Long Island, a quiet, upper-middle-class suburb of New York. From a young age, Trevor had a fascination with the mechanics of storytelling, but unlike most who chased the spotlight in front of the camera, Trevor was interested in what happened behind the scenes. He wasn't looking to be a star, he was looking to make them. After graduating from the University of Southern California's prestigious Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, Trevor dove into the chaotic world of Hollywood production. He started at the bottom, running scripts, managing schedules, handling egos. He quickly earned a reputation not for being flashy, but for being reliable. A man who could navigate the unpredictable tides of showbiz without losing his footing. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but he was the one people trusted when deadlines loomed and tempers flared. By the mid-2000s, Trevor had founded his own production company, Underground Films. He worked on projects ranging from modest indie ventures to more ambitious studio collaborations. He wasn't producing blockbusters, but he had carved out a solid, respectable lane for himself in a town where even stability is a rare luxury. His career trajectory was rising, not meteoric, but consistent, and it was in this phase of calm progress that Meghan Markle entered his life. Their relationship didn't begin with the glitz and glamour people often associate with Hollywood love stories. In fact, it was surprisingly down to earth. Trevor and Meghan met in 2004 through mutual industry contacts. She was a budding actress still finding her footing. He was a producer learning how to steer the ship. Their first few meetings were reportedly informal, lunches, parties, casual gatherings with friends. There was no red carpet romance, no paparazzi trail. Just two ambitious people trying to figure out if their lives could align. Friends of the couple from that period described the relationship as affectionate but complex. Meghan was fiercely ambitious. She was always networking, always polishing her presence, always looking ahead. Trevor, by contrast, was more grounded. He was content to build slowly, to let his work speak quietly. There were moments, those close to them say, when this difference in energy became apparent. Meghan thrived in chaos. Trevor tried to contain it. Still, they clicked. Their shared experience in the entertainment industry gave them common ground. They understood the sacrifices, the late nights, the unpredictable schedules. Meghan, who was then auditioning for small roles and guest appearances, leaned on Trevor not just as a partner but as a mentor of sorts. He had the connections, the insight, the experience. And Trevor, for his part, seemed proud to support her. They dated for 6 years before tying the knot in 2011. The wedding was held in Jamaica, sun-soaked, scenic, and relatively private. It was a far cry from Windsor Castle, but in its own way, it was a symbol of the life they were building together. Fun, free-spirited, and intentionally distanced from the pressures of Hollywood's elite circles. Guests later recalled the wedding as vibrant, intimate, and full of joy. There were no tabloids, no fanfare. Just a couple in love. But something shifted not long after they said, "I do." Meghan's career began to gain traction. In 2011, she landed the role that would define her early fame, paralegal Rachel Zane in the USA Network legal drama Suits. It was the breakthrough she had been chasing for nearly a decade. The show filmed in Toronto, meaning Meghan was now spending long stretches away from Los Angeles, from Trevor, from the life they had just begun to share as husband and wife. At first, the separation seemed manageable. Trevor would visit the set. They would fly to see each other. But as Meghan's star rose, so too did her social circle and her professional focus. She was now part of a cast, part of a brand, and she was building a name for herself independently of her husband. Trevor, still working diligently in LA, found himself playing second fiddle in a narrative he once believed they were writing together. Reports from those close to them say that the cracks in the marriage weren't marked by scandal or explosive arguments. It was more like a slow erosion. Distance, time, ambition, they all conspired against the relationship. Meghan reportedly became more fixated on her image, her branding, her public perception. Trevor, who had always preferred to stay behind the scenes, struggled to keep up with a partner who was increasingly moving in circles of publicity, polish, and positioning. Then came the ending, swift, surgical, and to Trevor, devastating. According to multiple sources, including royal biographers and Hollywood insiders, Meghan sent her wedding ring back to Trevor through the mail. No grand confrontation, no therapy sessions, just a silent conclusion to a story that had begun with such promise. Trevor, blindsided, was said to be heartbroken, humiliated, and confused. He had supported her dreams, encouraged her ambition, and now he was being written out of the story without so much as a final scene. In the years that followed, Trevor chose silence. He did not go to the press. He did not publish tell-all books or make talk show appearances. He didn't leverage his former connection to a now global figure. He went back to work, producing films and managing projects. To those who knew him, Trevor was trying to rebuild, quietly, with dignity. But the wound remained. When Meghan married Prince Harry in 2018, Trevor's name surfaced again. Tabloids resurrected old photos. Commentators dug into their past. But Trevor remained mum. Even as conspiracy theories swirled around Meghan's transformation, from TV actress to royal duchess, he kept his distance. He had remarried in 2019 to Tracy Corland, a dietitian and the daughter of a wealthy financier. For a while, it looked as though he had finally closed the Meghan chapter of his life. So what changed? What brought Trevor back into the public conversation? And more importantly, why would he choose to speak now, specifically, about something as private and controversial as Meghan's alleged infertility? The answer may be more layered than it appears. There is, of course, the emotional undercurrent. Trevor was not just a former boyfriend. He was a husband. He knew Meghan in ways few others did. Their relationship, for all its silence, was not insignificant. It was formative. It was real. And if, as he claims, she confided in him about her surgery, then that memory, buried for over a decade, likely shaped his view of everything that came after. Professionally, Trevor no longer needs to protect his image in connection to hers. He has built his own legacy. Personally, he may feel liberated by time, distance, and closure. But those who know him suggest a deeper motivation. They say Trevor was tired of the rewriting, tired of the narrative that painted Meghan as the victim, the misunderstood outsider, the woman who triumphed over everyone who doubted her. He wasn't angry, they say. He was hurt. And he believed people had a right to know the version of events that didn't make it into the palace-approved scripts. This brings us back to the heart of the matter. Trevor Engelson isn't just a name from Meghan's past. He's the man who knew her when the cameras weren't watching, when the palace gates were still closed, when ambition had not yet met aristocracy. His story, his version, complicates the fairy tale. It forces us to ask, who was Meghan before the crown? What did she sacrifice, and what did she choose to conceal? In the coming sections, we'll dive deeper into the alleged medical procedure, the timeline of events, and the implications of Trevor's claims on Meghan's public persona and royal legacy. But before we do, let's be clear about one thing. Trevor Engelson may have spent years in the background, but his voice, once silent, now echoes with a weight that cannot be ignored. Whether you believe him or not, his story demands to be heard. When Trevor Engelson first shared the statement that ignited a firestorm, she told me she'd never be able to carry a child and begged me to keep it secret. It was more than a soundbite. It was a direct challenge to the carefully curated narrative Meghan Markle had constructed around her motherhood and identity. For years, the Duchess of Sussex has presented herself as both a hands-on mother and a victim of intense media scrutiny. But Trevor's claim suggests a fracture in that story, a hidden medical truth that, if verified, would change everything from the timeline of events to the very nature of Meghan's role in royal succession. To fully grasp the implications, one must begin by unpacking exactly what Trevor claims happened. According to him, during the later years of their relationship, specifically before their 2013 divorce, Meghan underwent a significant uterine procedure. While he has not detailed the exact nature of the operation, he has maintained that the result was a medically confirmed inability to carry a pregnancy to term. In his words, it was a life-altering diagnosis that left her emotionally guarded, professionally determined, and personally terrified of public exposure. This wasn't just a standard outpatient procedure, Trevor allegedly clarified to a close associate. This was something deeper, more involved. He reportedly described it as a surgery recommended after multiple medical consultations and long periods of discomfort. He claimed that Meghan often complained of debilitating cramps, irregular cycles, and fatigue that would affect her mood and stamina, symptoms commonly associated with certain reproductive disorders. To assess the credibility of such a claim, medical experts were consulted off the record by several media agencies following the public eruption of this allegation. One gynecologist, who reviewed the general information without diagnosing Meghan herself, noted that several reproductive conditions can lead to permanent infertility if not addressed early or if complications arise during surgical treatment. Conditions such as endometriosis, adenomyosis, fibroids, or uterine scarring from repeated procedures like DNCS, dilation, and curettage, can all result in the loss of reproductive function, particularly if the uterus is compromised or removed. While Trevor did not claim that Meghan had a hysterectomy, the implications of what he did say lead many to speculate that the surgery may have been extreme enough to prevent implantation or sustain gestation. In other words, she may still possess reproductive organs, but not in a state that could support a natural pregnancy. Another critical factor in this narrative is the timing. If Meghan had this surgery in her late 20s, roughly between 2008 and 2012, this would place the procedure well before she met Prince Harry in 2016. That means the decision to keep it secret predated the royal connection. But once Meghan began dating Harry, the stakes would have risen exponentially. Any admission of infertility would have risked ending the relationship before it truly began, especially given the monarchy's unspoken expectations around heirs and lineage. Trevor has claimed that this context shaped Meghan's entire approach to both their marriage and her future relationships. According to him, Meghan was deeply insecure about her medical condition, not because she pitted herself, but because she believed others would see her as less than whole. In her mind, motherhood was part of the image she was expected to fulfill, both as an actress and later as a royal consort. If the world learned that she couldn't bear children, she feared it would cast a permanent shadow over her public image. One source close to Trevor, who spoke anonymously, said that Meghan's reaction to the procedure wasn't just emotional. It was strategic. She grieved, of course she did, the source explained. But she also immediately began thinking of how to reframe the narrative. Meghan doesn't let circumstances define her. She defines them. That's her power. But it also makes her unpredictable. This reframing, according to the same source, may have involved exploring options like egg preservation, surrogacy, or even full secrecy if and when the issue ever became public. Meghan allegedly told Trevor that her reproductive limitations were no one's business and that she would rather take it to her grave than let it become gossip fodder. That resolve, they said, only hardened once she entered the royal sphere. But despite Trevor's insistence, the lack of documentation or medical records has become a point of contention. Critics argue that without physical proof, the claim is just hearsay. Another example of a disgruntled ex trying to insert himself into a story that has moved beyond him. Others, however, point to the fact that medical privacy laws in the United States would make it nearly impossible for anyone, even the press, to obtain Meghan's surgical history without her consent. In other words, unless she chooses to confirm or deny it, the truth may remain sealed behind layers of legal and ethical barriers. Still, clues might exist in the public record, albeit between the lines. Meghan has often spoken about the challenges of being a mother, the pain of miscarriage, and the importance of women's health. Yet in none of these public disclosures has she ever hinted at the kind of permanent diagnosis that Trevor is now alleging. That silence may be strategic, or it may suggest that the surgery, if it happened, is something she has consciously chosen to compartmentalize from her narrative. Then there's the question of her pregnancies, both of which have been the subject of intense public scrutiny. From the beginning, rumors swirled about inconsistencies in her baby bump, the way it moved, changed shape, and appeared or disappeared depending on the angle of the camera. Meghan's maternity photos were often tightly controlled, stylized, and limited in release. The traditional post-birth photo op outside the hospital, a rite of passage for royal mothers like Princess Diana and Kate Middleton, was notably skipped. Instead, Meghan and Harry chose to unveil Archie in a staged indoor event 2 days after his birth, raising eyebrows among royal watchers. Further suspicion was fueled by reports that the attending medical team during Archie's delivery was unusually small and that the location of the birth was kept under wraps until well after the event. For Lilibet's birth, the details were even more vague. The couple announced her arrival via press release, stating that she was born in California, far from the royal facilities traditionally used for heirs. The absence of photographic proof, combined with Meghan's aversion to questions about the births, only fed the belief that something was being hidden. If Trevor's claim is true, these discrepancies take on new meaning. The secrecy, the avoidance, the controlled narratives, they might not be paranoia or defiance. They might be protection. Protection of a secret that, if revealed, would not only undermine Meghan's story as a mother but challenge the very basis on which her children are included in the royal succession. One cannot overstate the implications of that. The royal family operates on precedent and bloodlines. Any question about the biological connection between Meghan and her children would have serious consequences, not just for public perception, but for the legal and constitutional framework of monarchy. If either child were born via surrogacy and the palace was not informed or did not approve the arrangement under its strict succession guidelines, that could lead to a legal challenge regarding titles and inheritance. And yet, the palace has remained silent. As it often does, it has refused to dignify rumors with responses, likely believing that to acknowledge them would lend them legitimacy. But behind closed doors, insiders suggest that conversations have taken place. Staffers have reportedly raised concerns about inconsistencies, and some senior royals are said to have quietly questioned the official birth narratives, though no one has publicly broken ranks. If there is any record of such a surgery, it has likely been buried deep. Meghan, through her legal and medical advisors, would have ensured maximum confidentiality. In the United States, under HIPAA regulations, a hospital or physician cannot release medical information to anyone without the patient's explicit consent. That means no investigative journalist, no ex-husband, no royal biographer can confirm anything without her permission. But what of Meghan's motivations? If she did undergo such a surgery, and if she did ask Trevor to keep it secret, was it deception or self-preservation? That question lies at the core of the public's split reaction. For many women, the fear of infertility is devastating. It challenges identity, faith, and self-worth. In Meghan's case, such a condition could have also derailed her relationship with Prince Harry, a man whose life is interwoven with the pressures of continuing a royal bloodline. If she believed that revealing the truth would cost her that future, is it any surprise she kept it to herself? Others argue that honesty should have prevailed. If Meghan knew she could not carry a child, and if she later presented herself as a biological mother to two royal heirs without disclosing that fact, then that secrecy crosses from personal privacy into institutional misrepresentation. It's not just about her anymore. It's about the monarchy, the nation, and the trust placed in those who hold symbolic power. This tension between personal autonomy and public duty is not new for the royals. But Meghan's case is different. She was not born into the institution. She married into it. And with that marriage came scrutiny, expectation, and access to one of the most powerful platforms in the world. If Trevor's story is true, then Meghan built part of that platform on a hidden truth, one she was desperate to bury under layers of charisma, charm, and curated family images. Still, there are those who defend her right to privacy unconditionally. They argue that her womb is not the public's business, that whether or not she carried her children should be irrelevant in an age of reproductive technology and evolving family norms. They insist that Trevor's revelation, even if accurate, is a betrayal of intimate trust, a last gasp of relevance from a man long left behind. But the issue is not just personal. It is public because Meghan made it public. She stood before the world as a mother, posed with her newborns, spoke of the joys and challenges of pregnancy. Her image as a maternal figure has been central to her brand, from her charitable work to her media ventures. If that image was constructed on a selective truth, it deserves scrutiny. In the next section, we will explore why Meghan might have been so determined to keep this secret. What was at stake emotionally, socially, and professionally? And how did that decision to hide the alleged surgery shape the years that followed, both for her and for those around her? Let's examine the cost of secrecy, and the legacy it may have created. Secrets are not always kept out of malice. Sometimes they are born from fear, from shame, or from a desperate need to maintain control over a life spiraling into unpredictability. In the case of Meghan Markle, if Trevor Engelson's claim is to be believed, the secret she allegedly asked him to protect was not just a medical detail. It was a linchpin in the persona she would later present to the world. To understand why this alleged surgical history remained hidden, we must go deeper than the surface of scandal and controversy. We must examine the psychology, the context, and the cultural expectations that often bind women to silence about their bodies, especially when those bodies do not align with societal or institutional ideals. Trevor's statement was simple but emotionally charged. Meghan told him she could never carry a child, and she begged him to keep that information secret. These few words suggest more than a passing conversation between spouses. They point to a moment of profound vulnerability, a moment Meghan likely saw as both dangerous and defining. If true, this moment wasn't about facts, it was about survival. In Meghan's world, admitting to infertility could have felt like surrendering to a future of judgment, pity, and disqualification. In her early career, Meghan already faced systemic barriers. She was biracial in an industry that prized typecasting and predictability. She wasn't easily categorized, which made casting directors hesitant. She was considered too ethnically ambiguous for white roles and too refined for stereotypical black roles. Now imagine, on top of that, the added complexity of carrying a medical condition that could render her incompatible with traditional female leads, roles that so often demanded not just beauty and charisma, but fertility and maternal appeal. In an industry obsessed with image, even whispers of infertility could be career-ending. There is a brutal calculus in how Hollywood treats women. Youth is currency. Beauty is expected. Fertility is an unspoken requirement. Once an actress is perceived as less than ideal, as emotionally unstable, as physically compromised, or as biologically incomplete, she is often sidelined. No amount of talent or charm can protect a woman from the industry's preference for perfection. Meghan likely knew this. She had already seen what happened to women who spoke openly about their health struggles. She understood that in order to move forward, to command attention, and to rise above the noise, she had to maintain the illusion of seamless, unstoppable femininity. But beyond Hollywood, there was another force looming in Meghan's path: the institution of monarchy. Even long before Prince Harry entered her life, Meghan was acutely aware of power dynamics. She studied international relations. She interned at the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires. She wasn't naive about politics or public image. She understood how legacy institutions like the British royal family operate, steeped in tradition, obsessed with bloodlines, and built on centuries of inherited authority. When she eventually met Prince Harry, she was entering not just a relationship, but a system designed around continuity and procreation. To marry into the House of Windsor is to accept an unspoken contract, to produce heirs. Not just children, but heirs with royal blood, heirs who are visibly and biologically tied to the institution. It is one of the few remaining monarchies where legitimacy is judged not only by action but by ancestry. Meghan may have believed that if she revealed her infertility, she would not only be disqualified from joining the family but would also become a target of media disdain, royal coldness, and public rejection. The fear of this rejection likely haunted her. For someone who had fought her way into the spotlight, who had finally earned a seat at the table, the idea of losing everything over a medical condition must have been terrifying. This fear was not just emotional, it was existential. In Meghan's view, infertility was not a medical footnote. It was a potential exile from the future she had worked so hard to achieve. This context explains why she might have asked Trevor to keep the secret buried. Not out of deceit, but out of protection. Protection of a dream. Protection of a reputation. Protection of a version of herself she believed she needed to become in order to succeed. But in asking Trevor to remain silent, Meghan created a parallel narrative, one where truth and image diverged, one where she was forced to live in constant fear of exposure. When Meghan began dating Prince Harry, she was no longer a struggling actress. She had a successful role on Suits, a growing social media presence, and a curated image as a modern humanitarian. But underneath that exterior, according to Trevor's claim, was a secret that threatened to undo all of it. If Harry knew about the alleged surgery and still chose to marry her, then perhaps the story ends as a testament to their love. But if he did not, then the silence becomes something else, something heavier. Insiders who worked with Meghan during her courtship with Harry noted that she was extremely private about her health and her past relationships. She rarely spoke about Trevor, and when she did, it was brief and emotionally detached. She often deflected questions about her family, her marriage, or her medical history with practiced grace. There was a sense, even among close friends, that Meghan had built emotional walls. She was charming, yes, but she was guarded. And that guardedness, they now say, makes more sense in light of Trevor's allegation. The royal family is no stranger to secrets. Affairs, scandals, hidden medical conditions, they have all been part of the monarchy's hidden archive. But what makes Meghan's alleged secrecy unique is the timing. She wasn't born into the system. She chose it. And in choosing it, she was subjected to an even harsher level of scrutiny. Every move she made was dissected, every choice judged. She had to be perfect, not just by royal standards, but by public expectations that were razor-sharp and often unforgiving. So what were her options? To disclose her infertility and risk losing Harry's affection? To tell the palace and potentially be rejected by the firm? Or to maintain silence, find another way to motherhood if possible, and preserve the dream she had worked her entire life to realize? Meghan, according to many who knew her, was always calculating, not in a manipulative sense, but in a self-protective one. She had learned early on that the world was not kind to women who revealed too much. She knew that strength, in the public eye, was often measured by how well one hid weakness. In this sense, keeping her alleged infertility a secret wasn't just a personal choice. It was a survival strategy. There is also the cultural component. For many women, especially women of color, infertility is wrapped in layers of stigma. In communities where motherhood is seen as a defining role, to be unable to conceive is often viewed as a silent shame. Women are taught to endure in silence, to pretend, to power through without ever letting the mask slip. Meghan's background, her upbringing, and her relentless pursuit of respectability may have made it impossible for her to speak openly about her condition, if the condition indeed existed. It's also worth considering that Meghan may have genuinely believed the secret could remain buried forever. She had managed to keep many details of her personal life away from the press. Her father's fall from grace, her sister's bitter interviews, and her carefully controlled media appearances all pointed to a woman who knew how to manage narrative. But what she may have underestimated is how silence in one era can become the scandal of another. When Trevor eventually chose to speak out, whether for closure, truth, or personal vindication, he shattered that silence. His revelation reintroduced Meghan's past into her present, forcing the public to reassess everything they thought they knew about her journey to motherhood. If the secret had remained buried, perhaps Meghan's version of events would have stood unchallenged. But once exposed, the question wasn't just about what happened. It became about why it had to be hidden in the first place. There's another layer to this: Meghan's children. Archie and Lilibet have been at the center of royal controversy since birth. Their skin tone was allegedly questioned by a senior royal before Archie's arrival. Their titles were debated. Their photographs were delayed. Their baptisms were held privately. All of this was framed as Meghan and Harry seeking privacy. But if the children were born via surrogate, a possibility now speculated upon given Trevor's claim, then secrecy was not just a preference. It was a necessity. In the UK, a child born via surrogate does not automatically inherit royal status unless legal pathways are followed and disclosed to the royal household. If Meghan kept her alleged surgery secret, and if she used surrogates for her children without informing the monarchy or the public, then the consequences extend beyond privacy. They touch legal and constitutional questions that the royal family cannot ignore. And if Harry was unaware, the emotional betrayal would be nearly incalculable. But none of this should overshadow the personal cost Meghan would have endured. Carrying the burden of infertility, pretending otherwise, and building a family under a microscope must have been emotionally exhausting. The fear of discovery, the pressure to perform, the need to protect her children while defending her image, all of it compounds into a psychological toll that few can understand. In the end, secrecy may have seemed like the only option. Meghan may have convinced herself that truth was too dangerous, too disruptive, too vulnerable to survive in the world she was building. And maybe she was right. But the cost of that secrecy, the emotional weight, the public fallout, the damage to trust, was far higher than she may have anticipated. As we move forward, we will now turn our attention to the man who held that secret for years. What was the emotional impact on Trevor Engelson? What did it mean for him to carry a truth he could not share? And what finally drove him to break his silence? Let's explore the emotional fallout of the man left holding a truth too heavy to bear. When the world thinks of Meghan Markle, it often thinks of royalty, controversy, and reinvention. But before the castles, before the courtiers and headlines, there was a man named Trevor Engelson who had walked beside her, not just as a partner, but as a husband who carried the emotional weight of secrets never meant to be shared. When Trevor allegedly learned of Meghan's inability to bear children, he wasn't just receiving medical information. He was receiving a confession that would haunt his memories long after their marriage crumbled. The emotional fallout from this revelation was not a single moment of heartbreak. It was a slow-burning grief that shaped the years of his life that followed. Trevor Engelson was not just a producer or a name attached to Meghan's past. He was her closest confidant during some of her most formative years. While the world may now label him the ex, it's easy to forget that at one time, he had been the one. They had planned a future together, built a life, traveled, laughed, fought, and dreamed in tandem. For Trevor, marriage was not a stepping stone. It was a promise. And when Meghan allegedly sat him down and revealed the truth about her condition, the secret surgery that made it medically impossible for her to carry a child, his response, as sources close to him have said, was not judgment, but heartbreak. The first wave of that heartbreak was confusion. At the time, Meghan framed the revelation as something she had come to terms with. According to what Trevor told a friend in confidence, she spoke in clinical terms. There was no crying, no trembling. She spoke as though she had separated herself emotionally from the loss. But Trevor had not. He had imagined a family, children who shared their features, a future that included parenthood in the traditional sense. And now, in a single sentence, that future had collapsed. But more than the loss of a dream, Trevor reportedly felt something even heavier: exclusion. Meghan didn't bring him into her pain. She didn't ask for his thoughts or involve him in the decision. The surgery had allegedly taken place before they were married, and by the time she told him, it was already in the past. She had made the choice, faced the doctors, lived through the aftermath, all without him. And that exclusion, that sense of being shut out from something so intimate, left him feeling irrelevant to her most vulnerable moments. Still, he didn't leave. In fact, according to multiple sources close to him at the time, Trevor tried to lean in. He suggested alternatives: adoption, surrogacy, or even a child-free life filled with travel and creative work. He wasn't interested in abandoning the marriage just because biological children weren't possible. He believed that love could adapt, that their bond could survive the shift in expectations. He reassured her, again and again, that she was enough. But something had already shifted in Meghan. The woman who once leaned on Trevor began pulling away. She became less emotionally available, more fixated on her rising career. The long-distance dynamic created by her filming schedule in Toronto made things worse. They began spending more time apart than together. And whenever they did reunite, it was often under a cloud of tension. Conversations became clipped. Affection felt rehearsed. Trevor reportedly felt like a placeholder in her life, present, but no longer essential. One particularly close friend of Trevor's recalled a moment during this period that spoke volumes. It was during a birthday celebration. Meghan had flown back to Los Angeles for a few days between filming. The gathering was small, just a few friends and family. Trevor, excited to have her home, had gone out of his way to organize the evening. But throughout the night, Meghan seemed distracted. She spent much of the dinner on her phone. When asked about her mood, she deflected with jokes. When the cake was brought out, she smiled politely but didn't engage with any sentimental gestures. After the party, Trevor reportedly confided that he felt like she was already gone. That sense of loss, even before the marriage officially ended, was the beginning of Trevor's emotional unraveling. The final blow came not from a fight, but from silence. One day, after another long stint apart, Trevor received a package in the mail. Inside was his wedding ring. No letter, no explanation, just the ring. That gesture, cold, final, and utterly void of closure, was the moment Trevor realized he had been erased from Meghan's story. The months that followed were marked by a deep depression. Trevor withdrew from social gatherings. He buried himself in work, but even that couldn't shield him from the internal storm. Friends noticed he became more cynical, less optimistic. There were days he didn't return calls, nights when he drank too much. Conversations often circled back to Meghan, even when he tried to avoid them. He wasn't angry, at least not at first. He was wounded, confused by how quickly the person he had loved had moved on. What complicated the pain even further was the world's evolving perception of Meghan. As she ascended to global fame, Trevor had to watch the woman who once shared his bed become an icon. Newsstands featured her smile. Talk shows praised her elegance. She was being rebranded before his eyes, and in this new version, there was no room for him. Not as a memory, not as a footnote. He was gone. When she married Prince Harry, Trevor's name resurfaced in the media. But instead of being asked about his feelings, he was treated as gossip fodder. Headlines speculated about his reaction. Tabloids dug up old photos. Paparazzi tried to find him at local coffee shops. But through it all, Trevor remained silent. He gave no interviews, released no statements. For years, he carried the secret Meghan had asked him to protect, even as she built a new life on global display. This silence, however noble, took a toll. Friends say Trevor struggled with insomnia. He often questioned whether he had been used, whether his support during Meghan's darkest years had simply been a stepping stone to something bigger. One friend said Trevor compared himself to a dress rehearsal for the life she really wanted. The sentiment wasn't cruel. It was heartbreaking. He had loved her. He had believed in her. And in the end, he was left holding a truth he never asked to bear. What finally pushed him to speak, according to insiders, wasn't revenge. It was a sense of betrayal compounded over years. Trevor had hoped Meghan would one day acknowledge him. Not in a speech, not in a book, but perhaps in private, with gratitude or kindness. That moment never came. Instead, he watched as she repeatedly edited her past, removing his name, his face, his presence. And all the while, he kept the secret. A secret that had shaped their marriage. A secret that, in his view, explained much of what came after. When he finally did share the truth with a trusted source, it wasn't shouted from rooftops. It was offered quietly in conversation. He didn't sell the story. He didn't package it. He simply stated what he remembered, that Meghan had told him she could not have children, and that she asked him never to tell anyone. The revelation was not explosive in tone. It was weary, worn out. A confession of a man who had spent years carrying something too heavy for one heart alone. Trevor's emotional journey is not just one of heartbreak. It is one of silence, sacrifice, and eventual confrontation. For years, he tried to rewrite his own story, remarrying, building a new life, distancing himself from the spotlight. But some ghosts don't go away. They linger in the form of secrets kept too long, of truths suppressed in the name of love, or loyalty, or fear. When we talk about the fallout of public figures, we often focus only on the ones in the spotlight. But behind every scandal is a trail of invisible casualties. Trevor Engelson may not wear a crown or command a global audience, but he was once part of a story that became mythologized. And now, as the narrative starts to unravel, his voice offers a reminder that behind every perfect image lies a human cost. As we move forward, we will now turn our attention to how Meghan's entry into the royal family intersected with this secret, and how the institution's obsession with bloodlines, image, and legitimacy may have only intensified her decision to keep it buried. Let's examine what happened when Meghan crossed the threshold of Buckingham Palace, carrying not just ambition, but possibly a secret she hoped would never be uncovered. When Meghan Markle crossed the gates of the British monarchy, she didn't just step into a new role. She walked into one of the most powerful, secretive, and scrutinized institutions in modern history. Becoming part of the royal family isn't merely a marriage. It's an enlistment into a centuries-old legacy built on tradition, symbolism, and, perhaps most importantly, lineage. The House of Windsor does not only measure its relevance through diplomacy or public relations. It measures it through heirs, through continuity, through blood. This is the arena Meghan entered when she began dating Prince Harry in 2016. What unfolded in the years that followed became one of the most documented love stories of the modern age, complete with a transatlantic romance, global media frenzy, and ultimately, a royal wedding watched by over 2 billion people. But beneath the fairy tale aesthetic and the charming smiles was a less visible layer, an invisible pressure that Meghan, if Trevor's claims are true, would have felt from the very beginning. The pressure to deliver not just love, but legacy. Not just a marriage, but a future heir to the throne. The British royal family has long adhered to the principle of direct succession. The idea is simple. The next monarch must be a direct descendant of the current one. This tradition has survived wars, political upheavals, and even revolutions. It is one of the last vestiges of hereditary rule in a world that has increasingly embraced democracy. Which is why, for centuries, the ability to produce children, royal children, has been both an expectation and an obligation. Every spouse who enters the royal fold understands this, either explicitly or implicitly. It's part of the silent agreement. One only needs to look back at history to see how the inability to bear children has created crises within the monarchy. From Anne Boleyn's downfall to the drama surrounding Queen Victoria's descendants, the pressure to reproduce has never been separate from the crown. It is built into the system. For Meghan, a woman already grappling with the enormous cultural shift from actress to aristocrat, this pressure would have been immense. Publicly, she was praised for her poise, her eloquence, her ability to walk the line between Hollywood charm and royal decorum. But privately, if Trevor's story holds weight, Meghan may have been living with a secret that made all of it feel like a ticking time bomb. A secret that she had undergone a uterine surgery in her late 20s that left her unable to carry children naturally. If true, this knowledge would have transformed every moment of her courtship with Harry into a delicate negotiation. Could she tell him? Should she? Would he still want to be with her if he knew? Was it fair to enter his life without full disclosure? These questions, if they existed, were never answered publicly. But the silence surrounding them has only added to the speculation. And the more tightly the palace tried to protect Meghan's privacy, the more loudly the world speculated. It is worth noting that the royal family's internal vetting process is not as casual as it may seem. Every potential royal spouse is quietly vetted, by staff, by advisors, and often by intelligence services. Background checks are performed, medical histories are discreetly reviewed, and social ties are examined. In many cases, a thorough examination of a partner's health is conducted through indirect channels. If Meghan had undergone a serious surgery, it's possible that some royal advisors knew, or at least suspected. But knowing and confronting are two different things. It is entirely possible that the institution chose not to ask, not to probe, and simply accepted whatever narrative was presented to them. When Meghan and Harry's relationship became public, the scrutiny intensified overnight. Paparazzi followed their every move. Tabloids published details about Meghan's family, her career, her fashion, and even her handwriting. Every ex-boyfriend, every college photo, every red carpet appearance was reanalyzed. But amid this relentless storm of media coverage, one topic remained untouched: her fertility. That silence may not have been accidental. Meghan and Harry kept many aspects of their relationship private during their early days. When they were engaged, they gave only limited interviews. Their wedding planning was shrouded in secrecy. And when Meghan became pregnant with Archie, their approach became even more guarded. Unlike previous royal pregnancies, which involved public announcements of medical details, scheduled photo ops, and transparency about hospital choices, Meghan and Harry shared almost nothing. When they announced that they were expecting Archie in 2018, it came via a brief, carefully worded statement. No due date was given. No hospital was named. Meghan continued to make public appearances, often wearing loose-fitting clothing that left her bump mostly to the imagination. When she finally went into labor, there was no media alert. No photo outside the hospital. The birth was confirmed after the fact, in a subdued statement that left more questions than answers. The birth itself became a flashpoint for controversy. Reports later emerged that Meghan had delivered at the private Portland Hospital in London, a far cry from the Lindo wing where Kate Middleton gave birth to her 3 children. Unlike previous royal births, there were no official photos of Meghan leaving the hospital, no confirmation of the medical staff involved, and no clear timeline for the labor. Even the birth certificate, which was released later under public records law, raised eyebrows with its vague language and omissions. Then came the presentation of Archie to the world, a staged indoor event at Windsor Castle, carefully choreographed, with no live media present. Meghan wore white, cradled a blanket-wrapped baby, and smiled alongside Harry. But the moment, instead of settling rumors, only inflamed them. The baby was barely visible. The interaction felt controlled. And observers who had covered royal events for decades noted how sharply this diverged from protocol. From that point onward, whispers about surrogacy began to grow. Photos of Meghan during her pregnancy were dissected frame by frame. One clip, in particular, showed her bending down and appearing to adjust a part of her dress, only for the bump to seemingly shift in shape. While such optical illusions are common, the video went viral. Conspiracy theorists seized upon it. And in the absence of clear answers from the palace, speculation turned into public belief. For Meghan and Harry, maintaining silence may have been a way to preserve a semblance of normalcy. They had already faced racism, tabloid attacks, and estrangement from both the press and palace. To add questions about their children's birth could have felt like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. So they did what many couples do under pressure. They kept their heads down and tried to move forward. But forward has never been easy. When they stepped back from royal duties in 2020, many believed it was simply about freedom. But Trevor's alleged claim now casts a different light. What if stepping back was also about stepping away from scrutiny they feared would one day unravel their carefully protected truths? What if, beneath the talk of mental health and press intrusion, there was a deeper fear that their children's legitimacy might someday be questioned by the very institution they had tried to serve? In their Oprah interview, Meghan and Harry spoke about racism, isolation, and the pain of life inside the palace. But when asked directly about surrogacy or pregnancy rumors, they dodged. Meghan reaffirmed that she had been pregnant, but she gave no details. She did not address the inconsistencies in public appearances, nor did she offer a straightforward denial of the speculation. To some, this was proof of nothing. To others, it was everything. If Meghan had disclosed her fertility issues to Harry, and if he had accepted her fully, then theirs is a story of compassion and unity. But if he was unaware, or if the palace was misled about the nature of the births, then the consequences are far-reaching. It would not only be a breach of personal trust, it could be interpreted as a breach of royal protocol. And yet, the public remains divided. Some view Meghan as a victim of cruel media harassment and outdated royal expectations. Others see her as a calculated figure who built a brand on half-truths and omissions. But what cannot be denied is that her entrance into the royal family was not simply a love story. It was a political act, a cultural moment, and if she carried a secret into that moment, a secret as significant as a life-altering surgery, then every photo, every headline, every baby announcement must now be reconsidered. As we move into the next section, we will explore the next layer of this story, the surrogacy rumors. Where did they start? Why have they persisted? And how does Trevor's revelation now throw fuel on a fire that many had long assumed would burn out? Let's turn to the public's relentless quest to find the truth behind the pregnancies and the implications of a possible royal surrogacy never disclosed. From the moment Meghan Markle announced her first pregnancy in October 2018, something strange began to happen. It was subtle at first. A few questions here and there on social media. Comments under royal Instagram posts. Observers began pointing out things they said didn't add up. The timeline felt rushed. Meghan looked different. Her demeanor, her appearance, even her clothing choices became the subject of microscopic examination. What should have been a joyous moment in royal history quickly turned into a breeding ground for conspiracy theories. The term moon bump entered online discussions, a phrase used by skeptics who believed Meghan's baby bump was not genuine. Internet forums exploded with slowed-down video footage of Meghan bending over, sitting down, walking in and out of cars, and placing her hands on her belly. In some clips, her bump appeared to shift position or fold in unusual ways. One video in particular, of Meghan bending to pick something off the ground, became viral, as viewers claimed it showed the belly deflating unnaturally. From that moment, the questions intensified. Why, people asked, did Meghan seem to cradle her bump so obsessively in every photo? Why were her maternity outfits so loose and draped, often hiding her shape more than accentuating it? Why was there no detailed birth plan released, as is customary with royal births? Why were there no paparazzi photos of her entering or leaving the hospital? To some, these were minor irregularities. To others, they were signs of a much larger deception. Trevor Engelson's alleged revelation that Meghan told him she could never carry children brought new fuel to these long-simmering doubts. If Meghan truly had undergone a uterine procedure that rendered her infertile before she ever met Harry, then the pregnancy announcements, the public appearances, and the official baby photos take on an entirely new light. Not only does it validate what many had speculated for years, but it also raises the stakes significantly. If Meghan and Harry used a surrogate for their children and intentionally kept it hidden, that would be more than a private decision. It would be a public deception. Unlike in the United States, where surrogacy is more common and culturally accepted in celebrity circles, the United Kingdom treats it with legal caution. Surrogacy is legal in the UK, but there are strict laws governing it. Commercial surrogacy is prohibited. More importantly, any child born through a surrogate must go through a legal parental order process before the intended parents are recognized as legal guardians. In the case of royalty, where titles, inheritance, and constitutional protocols are involved, the process would be even more sensitive. It would require transparency, disclosure, and most likely, palace approval. If Meghan and Harry chose surrogacy, but decided to keep it from the palace, from the public, or from both, they were walking into a minefield. A royal child born through surrogacy and hidden behind layers of media control would trigger not just controversy, but a legitimacy crisis. And that's exactly what many believe Meghan was trying to avoid. Let's go back to Archie's birth in 2019. Typically, when a royal baby is born, the palace announces the labor, the hospital, and the delivery within hours. Photos are released. Doctors are named. A statement is made by the palace spokesperson. With Archie, almost none of that happened. Meghan went into labor in secret. The palace issued a statement hours after the fact. The public was not informed until the baby had already arrived. When asked about the delivery location, the palace was vague. Some outlets reported Meghan had given birth at the Portland Hospital in London, a private facility not typically used by royals. Others speculated she had delivered at home in Frogmore Cottage. The presentation of Archie also deviated from royal custom. There was no photo on the steps of the hospital, no crowd of photographers. Instead, Meghan and Harry appeared 2 days later in St. George's Hall at Windsor Castle for a brief, heavily controlled photo call. Meghan wore a white trench-style dress. Harry held the baby. The event was quiet, brief, and allowed little visual confirmation. The newborn was wrapped in a blanket and shown for only a few seconds. Royal reporters present that day described it as the most controlled media moment in recent palace memory. Surrogacy rumors gained even more momentum after that appearance. Many believed Meghan's appearance looked inconsistent with someone who had given birth 2 days earlier. She looked rested. Her figure had not changed significantly. Observers noted that other royal mothers, like Kate Middleton, often looked visibly fatigued and physically altered in the immediate postpartum period. Meghan, by contrast, seemed untouched. The lack of visible medical staff, hospital confirmation, or raw behind-the-scenes photos only amplified the whispers. Even the official birth certificate, released later, failed to quell suspicions. While it did confirm Archie's place and date of birth, it lacked the traditional signatures from the attending obstetrician, a royal custom going back generations. The document also listed Meghan as a princess of the United Kingdom, despite her public identity being primarily Duchess of Sussex. Some interpreted this as an intentional deflection, a legal technicality used to avoid deeper questions. Then came the birth of Lilibet Diana in 2021. By this time, Meghan and Harry had stepped back from royal duties and relocated to California. The announcement of Lilibet's birth came via a simple press release on their Archwell website. The child had been born at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, a private medical center in California. No photos were released. No media was allowed. No details about the attending staff, time of labor, or delivery method were shared. For months, there were no images of Lilibet at all. When a birthday photo of Lilibet was finally released, it sparked another round of debate. Observers questioned her age, her features, and her resemblance, or lack thereof, to Meghan and Harry. Theories proliferated. Some said the photo looked digitally altered. Others suggested the child was older than reported. The lack of transparency surrounding her birth made the public even more suspicious. By this point, the surrogacy narrative had taken on a life of its own. Independent researchers, anonymous Twitter accounts, and video essayists began compiling data. They cross-referenced timelines, public appearances, statements made by palace aides, and medical norms. Some went so far as to analyze Meghan's walking posture, shoe size, and body language across her pregnancy photos. While many dismissed these efforts as obsessive or misogynistic, others argued they were filling a void left by a palace that refused to clarify anything. The media played a complicated role in this cycle. Mainstream outlets often refused to publish surrogacy rumors, citing ethical concerns and legal risks. But behind the scenes, journalists admitted they were puzzled by the inconsistencies. Off the record, some royal correspondents confessed they were told not to ask certain questions. One reporter, in a private podcast episode that was later deleted, said they were stonewalled by palace aides when requesting basic information about Meghan's deliveries. Trevor Engelson's recent claim that Meghan had told him she could not have children has now reframed all of this speculation. It gives the rumors a foundation, a motive, a timeline. If Meghan knew before she even met Harry that she couldn't carry a child, then the pregnancies become part of a strategic narrative, not just for public consumption, but possibly to fulfill royal obligations. And this raises ethical questions of its own. If surrogacy was used, why not simply say so? In an era of increasing acceptance around alternative family planning, many argue that Meghan and Harry could have been pioneers. They could have normalized surrogacy within the monarchy, set a new precedent, and embraced transparency. But if they chose to hide it, it suggests they feared the consequences would be too severe. That the public, or the institution, or both, would not accept children born outside the royal womb. Royal history suggests this fear might have been valid. The monarchy has long emphasized biological continuity. Adopted children, surrogate-born heirs, or children born through non-traditional methods are not mentioned in royal succession laws. The system was built around the assumption of direct biological inheritance. Introducing alternative methods would require legal reform, public support, and institutional will, none of which currently exist in abundance. Which means, if Meghan and Harry did use a surrogate, acknowledging that truth might not only damage their personal reputations, but also disqualify their children from titles or standing within the royal line. It would be a scandal unlike any in recent history, one that combines issues of race, gender, secrecy, and institutional legitimacy. So the silence continues. But silence is no longer a shield. Trevor's claim has reopened the door to public inquiry. People who once dismissed the surrogacy theories as internet fringe now ask questions with new urgency. Was Meghan ever pregnant? Did the palace know the truth? Did Harry? And if so, why the cover-up? For Meghan, this moment represents a crossroads. She can continue to protect the secret, if there is one, and hope the media storm passes. Or she can address it directly, transparently, and set the record straight. Each path comes with risks. But the longer the silence, the louder the questions. As we prepare to move into the next section, we will explore what Meghan herself has said publicly about motherhood, pregnancy, and loss. What has she revealed? What has she hidden? And are there any clues, intentional or not, that support or challenge Trevor's claims? Let's examine Meghan's own words and public narratives about her journey into motherhood and see what they reveal beneath the surface. Tonight, a bombshell claim from Meghan's ex-husband, Trevor Engelson, threatens to upend everything we thought we knew about the royal narrative. He alleges Meghan underwent a private uterine surgery in her late 20s, one that made natural pregnancy medically impossible. According to Trevor, she confessed the truth to him, and then begged him never to tell a soul. But why is he speaking out now? And what does this mean for Archie, Lilibet, and the future of the royal bloodline? What we uncover next may shake the foundations of royal trust, succession, and motherhood itself. Stay with us,